And then it says, after 2 days he will revive us. So that was saying that Messiah would go away after being killed, like we just read in the end of chapter 5. He said that he would go away until people would recognize what they did. Obviously, not. There are two ways of seeing it, because the 144,000 will realize that the teaching that they are receiving is not the true teaching, and then when they realize that, they will seek the Almighty, and Yahweh will reveal to them, as He has been doing, the true doctrine. So that is in a way a fulfillment of this. However, obviously there will be a time in which everybody that has ever lived on this earth will be present, and they will all know what they have done and who is king. So then they will have to recognize his power and his kingdom, etc. My point is that there will be a microcosm when the 144,000 realize, turn back, seek his presence. They will be healed, saved. And the many, since they won't do it on time, they will have to go through the great tribulation, die, and then they will be resurrected, justified, and they will recognize who the true Almighty and Messiah is. So all of this has to do obviously with the people. He's talking in plural, but has to do with the fact that they rejected Yahweh and even killed his son 2,000 years ago. That's why he mentions 2 days, because 1,000 years to Yahweh is like a day. So today, 2,000 years. Come, let us return to Yahweh. Also, when we read Isaiah 53, there are actually many chapters that show that Yahweh would send his Messiah as his son. He would die, then be resurrected, and through that, life would be offered to all those who believe in the way that Yahweh sent. Yet a lot of Jewish people are against Messiah, so they forbid others from reading those chapters that are very clear regarding that prophecy, like Daniel 9, Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and there are plenty, but those three that I just mentioned, like the whole chapter is important. The many other prophecies, which are like hundreds, are 1 or 2 or 3 verses, so they tend to hide within the context when these rabbis or pastors teach those specific chapters. So they mainly focus on prohibiting reading Isaiah 53, because it shows how Messiah would come and suffer for our sins. Some others who don't accept that prohibition mainly do it because they accept a wrong interpretation given by Rashi and others. Regarding this, Rashi even said something that kind of confirms the real point, but their main interpretation is that Isaiah 53 is talking about Israel suffering for their own sins. However, it makes no sense, because Isaiah 53 talks of a person, singular, suffering for a group of people, plural. So one suffers for the others, and that is to show the meekness and love and greatness of that one person who dies for the others. Yet the way they explain it is that it is Israel itself suffering for their own sins, so they themselves are paying for their own sins. So they make a mess, which makes no sense really when you read the whole context, but that's how they interpret it, that the chapter is actually talking about Israel. In this case, we see that it is talking in plural, so it is obvious that it is talking about Israel. And when we read the whole thing, like the previous chapter, we see that they are being torn and stricken because they rejected Yahweh. And when we see that it says, after 2 days he will revive us, and we know, and even Jewish people accept this, that history as we know it would last 6,000 years, because of the first 6 days of creation, because the seventh rest was created. Therefore, the seventh day represents the seventh millennium, when humanity will rest from sin and the earth will rest from evil people and many other things. When we see this and we understand that he will revive us, obviously means resurrection. Also, I repeat, in Judaism is understood that resurrection would come in the times of Messiah, and mainly the last millennium is that time. So, my point is that by seeing this, we can understand that it is talking about what happened 2,000 years ago, because the prophecy is promising after 2 days being revived, and that resurrection would come during the 6,000 year. So that means that it is talking about something that would happen in the year 4,000. And what is the amazing thing that happened in the year 4,000? Israel rejected the Messiah and killed him. So this whole thing has to do with what happened 2,000 years ago. But Yahweh promised, even hundreds of years before that Yahweh would heal the people for rejecting Messiah, because even that was part of the plan, so that the Gentiles could also enter if they came to the true belief in the true Messiah, of course. Come and let us return to Yahweh, for he has torn, but he will heal us. He has stricken, but he will bind us up. Two things like the first and the last. After 2 days he will revive us. So since they rejected Messiah, they were destroyed, some during the year 70 and many others along the 2,000 years. But he will heal us. He has stricken us, but he will bind us up. After 2 days he will revive us. So at the end of 2,000 years from when they rejected Messiah, the first resurrection will happen. That is the resurrection of those who will enter the millennium, the 7,000 years. Well, the 1,000 years, starting with the year 6,000. That is the Shabbat, the millennium, and the first resurrection will be at the very beginning of it, when the chosen few who do not die and the many who do die and then resurrect, they enter the wedding of the Lamb. The few are the congregation that marries Messiah, and the many are the ones who are invited to the wedding. So those are the ones that are revived after 2 days. On the third day, he will raise us up. So that could be even seen as a prophecy of Messiah resurrecting after having been hurt and stricken by his own people. But I repeat, it's talking in plural, and we see that it's talking about how after 2,000 years there would be a resurrection, and then after one extra 1,000 years, after the end of the Shabbat, another resurrection. That is the second resurrection, obviously. So after 2 days he will revive us, the first resurrection. On the third day he will raise us up, the second resurrection, to enter before the throne for judgment day, in which every single person that has ever lived will be present to be judged by the few who did not die 1,000 years before that. So on the third day he will raise us up, that we might live in his sight. And that even shows that by that moment everybody who has entered, obviously, after judgment, will live in his sight. It's talking about 3 days of 3,000 years, pretty much. Those 3 days are 3,000 years, and it takes us to the time when Mashiach was rejected, then resurrected, offered life, and through his resurrection, his Ruach, this will be possible. But all of this was written hundreds of years before Messiah came and died. So I repeat, it shows how he would come, be rejected, and then humanity would still have 2,000 years to go, which is something that most didn't understand at all, and still they don't, even though it is written. So that we may live in his sight. Let us know. Let us pursue the knowledge of Yahweh. As we read in Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Therefore, we must pursue the knowledge of Yahweh. That is very important. But people tend to want the knowledge of the world, meaning knowledge of making money, how to make money. That is the main one. Knowledge of how to steal, how to lie, and many other things. And many times with different words, of course, because people, well, what I mean is that in business, most of the time, people lie. But if you ask them if they are liars, they will say that they are not. And if you even tell them that they just lie regarding selling a product, they will say that's just part of the business. So they will excuse their wrongdoing because they think that it is justifiable because they're making money. So at the end, they are answering money, not the Almighty who said don't lie. They're answering money who said make me, make me, make me, like an idol.